On today's episode, we're sitting down with Mr. Scott Hammell, initiate at the Barton Lodge.
You're listening to The First Three Knocks, a Masonic podcast in the District of York, where we discuss topics for the betterment of Masonry. The opinions discussed in this podcast are those of the individual and do not represent the views of Grand Lodge or any other Masonic body. Now, here are your hosts.
Well, good afternoon, brethren, and good afternoon, initiate. This is very excited. My name is Worshipful Brother Bert Tellier. I'm the past master of the Rising Sun Lodge in Aurora, Ontario. Sitting down with...
I'm your co-host, Brother Gino Scovio, Junior Warden of the Rising Sun Lodge,
The
also
J-Dub.
in Aurora.
And Brother Steve Sprott of Zaradatha Lodge in beautiful, historic Uxbridge, Ontario.
Oh, you keep
There
stealing
we go
that
again.
one.
There we
You know,
go
we have to
I'm not
one-up you
stealing
here.
it.
We have to one-up you here.
If you're a pioneer and trailblazer, you're not stealing it.
Okay, you talented producer. You may win that one. We are coming to you from the Scottish Rite Club in Hamilton, Ontario. This is actually beautiful and historic as a building. We've been through the building, had an incredible tour. And we're sitting down with a really interesting individual this afternoon. One, he is initiate for the first degree in Freemasonry tonight, Mr. Scott Hammell. And also, he has been described as a 21st century Houdini. He's an entertainer, a speaker, Guinness World Record holder. Is that correct as well?
Yeah.
Wow. Incredible. So what a very exciting night for you, and welcome to the First Three Knocks, and welcome to your new home.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm super excited. I don't know fully what to expect yet, but yeah, I'm very excited. I have some good friends who are Masons and family who are Masons, and so yeah, I'm very excited to explore this.
So this is kind of interesting how you got involved. Our producer, Steve Sprott, and you were in contact, and I believe he helped you get in contact with the district here in Hamilton.
Yeah. Steve sent me a message just asking if I'd be interested in doing a speech/performance at a meeting, because a lot of what I speak about, from what I understand, is covered in meetings in one way or another. And so he asked if I'd be interested in that. And of course, just my natural fascination with Freemasonry. I've done a lot of reading on it over the years, and the family connections led me to just asking him some questions, and one thing led to another. It just kind of evolved. We ended up having, what would you say, like weekly phone conversations about this.
Oh yeah, there were discussions at a great extent. I think probably hour to 2 hour phone calls. Right off the bat, he was so interested in everything and wanted to know everything about it. And so we had a bunch of phone calls, and at the end, he still seemed interested. So
You didn't blow it, huh?
No, more than ever.
I did an all right job at explaining everything.
Waiting for that question to come, right? Because that's the whole thing. You just don't know how to ask, right?
For sure, yeah.
And boom, there it is. Oh, it only took 5 weeks and hours of phone calls every day.
The great thing about it was that I had just experienced my initiation. I had just experienced my second degree. So I was brand new into it, and to give that perspective to a candidate or a potential candidate from that perspective, not a Master Mason's perspective
It's fresh.
It's fresh, and you talk to a lot of Masons about Masonry, and they're talking from a perspective that is 25 years old, and they don't remember exactly what it's like to be a candidate and go through those things. So I think I was able to speak a little bit better towards Scott in that regard as well, and kind of give that perspective from my current perspective.
Well, it's worked out wonderfully. I mean, we've been around the building here. We've met some of the brethren from this lodge that you're joining, and we were just talking about it. What a treat for you, man!
You're a
in
lucky
for
guy.
a special night, and hopefully a wonderful Masonic career. Now, you're a really interesting individual. We don't normally get to interview folks like yourself. Tell us a little bit about your work that you do.
Yeah, I mean, it's not that I take it for granted. I wake up every day with a smile on my face because I'm so lucky to be doing what I do. But I forget that it's a fairly, unusual job, career path. So I think it kind of boils down to the fact that I'm a magician, and a lot of the big stunts that I've done have been focused around magic in one way or another. And the speeches that I offer, the speaking tours, are often based on the experiences from those world record stunts, and sometimes they're not even world records, they're just big stunt experiences that I think have a lot of pulls to leadership or communication or risk assessment or, you know, a number of things. The new speech that I'm working on right now is called A Stuntman's Guide to Staying Calm. So it's about, you know, how I've developed a career out of putting myself into stressful situations and what I've learned along the way to kind of, you know, keep myself calm and follow through on these things when I've got, you know, a loaded rifle pointed at my chest, or I'm in the doorway of an airplane blindfolded and handcuffed to my waist. Like, these are things that are incredibly stressful, even when you're trained. I'm not going to say that it's not, but, you know, I'm able to kind of draw these experiences, try to boil them down and put them in a way that, even though the audience is not necessarily going to be doing these outrageous stunts, there are some takeaways for them with real estate or, you know, running a hospital or whatever it may be. So
yeah, maybe share some, if you don't mind, share some of those key takeaways. I mean, you have an interesting message.
Of course, yeah. I mean, maybe if there's a specific one that you're more interested in than another, like I've got a wide variety of.
Well, I'd say, I mean, you brought up a great point around pressure and stress. You know, that's an everybody problem.
Sure, of course, absolutely, and I've been running a kind of side business as a hypnotist for over 15 years. So I've taken kind of what I've learned from that as well. The problem is that that's a word that can kind of trigger people in a certain way or another. There are negative misconceptions and stuff like that. And some of it I fully appreciate and understand. I think there are a lot of hacks out there. There's a lot of really bad people doing really bad stuff on stage with the X-rated hypnosis shows. I think that's really irresponsible and very, very far from what I do. I've stopped doing the kind of big production stage hypnosis shows, and most of the work that I do is kind of more on a one-on-one session, but getting people to quit smoking or lose weight, or again, stress reduction, help with sleep. But the techniques that I've learned from that have gone a long way in terms of keeping me calm and present. So, you know, for instance, would be absorbing the world through one sense at a time. I think that a lot of people, when they're feeling anxious or overwhelmed, it's because they're either dwelling on the past mistakes, past decisions that have led to an, you know, unfortunate present moment, or they're so busy focusing on what if scenarios that are probably never going to materialize that they neglect to put themselves into a present moment kind of state of mind, so to speak. So by absorbing the world one state at a time, what do I see? What do I feel? What do I smell? What do I taste? These things kind of force you to absorb the world in the present tense. And this is the only thing that we have. We can't obviously change the past. We can't know what's about to happen in the future. So that goes a long way. And, you know, this is one of the techniques that I learned to be very effective with hypnosis. Again, trying to get people to experience what they're experiencing now instead of being in their head.
Excellent. Very well said. Yeah. That's great insight. How long have you been working in this field? Like,
I started when I was 12 years old.
Wow.
So it's been, over 20 years for me now. Been very lucky. I picked up a book at a school book fair and taught myself how to juggle, and was at a competition, met another juggler who is also a magician, and he became my mentor. He took me under his wing and not only taught me, you know, how to escape from a straitjacket, for instance, but like how to run a business, how to communicate with clients effectively, how to, you know, promote yourself. And we became, you know, really close friends. And again, I had this mentor-apprentice relationship with him. He would be not furious with me, but embarrassed when I call him and refer to him as my mentor, because he's a very humble guy. But, you know, he was my mentor and still is. So then throughout middle school, I started performing at birthday parties and festival shows. High school, I started getting the opportunity to travel around the country and the Caribbean. And after high school, I was like, this is what I want to do. If I can make this work, great. Yeah. If I don't succeed at it, I can always go back to school or, you know, figure something else out.
Seems like fun. It seems like a passion.
Totally.
And you get to get up and do what you really enjoy.
Absolutely.
Whereas
I call
a lot
it getting
of us are grinding it out and, you know, hating it. So
for sure.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I call it getting paid to breathe, doing what I naturally do, and you know, just figuring out a way to get paid for it. And of course that changes over the years. I've done, you know, body double work. I've done the hypnosis stuff when I started sustaining major injuries because of the stunts. And, you know, it always kind of bobs and weaves, but it's always conducive to my passions and what I love doing. So yeah, I'm very, very lucky, and I know how lucky I am. I work very hard at it. And of course there are, external things that people think like, oh, that would be great. And they don't see the travel or the things that can wear on you a little bit more so than other people. But again, I fully appreciate and I love how lucky I am. And, I work very hard, but I'm still very lucky.
That's extremely well said, and you sound like a great candidate for initiation
totally.
in Freemasonry. I got to tell you, what kind of led you here to this point tonight? This being the day after the 225th anniversary of the Barton Lodge, you being the first initiate, I think, in that new year. What led you to this point?
My uncle was a Freemason when he was alive, and my grandpa and my great-grandpa. So I didn't ever really... I talked to my uncle about it a little bit, but my grandpa died when I was in grade 4, I believe. In the last few years of his life, he had Alzheimer's. So I wasn't able to connect with him the way I feel I would have with a mature state of mind. My uncle, I talked to him about it very briefly, just because I remember seeing, I don't remember if it was a ring or something in his car. I remember like we were in the kind of driveway of the cottage. I remember distinctly where I was when I saw it, but asked him about that, and he told me that it was about helping his community. That's the first thing that he said.
Awesome.
He said, I'm a Freemason because I like to help my community. And then of course, throughout the years, I've started noticing my friends with the Masonic rings and started asking them about it. And, then you'll find out years later, it's like, you've been a Mason this whole time. And it's just never
That'll
really
happen, yeah.
come up.
Never came up in conversation.
Yeah, for sure.
But it sounds like it kind of kept rolling back and coming back to you through either your grandfather or your family members or your friends. Again, just seeing those little square and compasses or little things that it would... recognize that that's a Mason, right?
Yeah, I think
It was calling you is what we're
definitely.
saying. Yeah.
I think I also have, it's not obsessive, but I'm very dedicated to proving myself wrong with my misconceptions. So when I started to become a skydiver, I thought that skydivers were, Red Bull drinking party animal, like, kind of guys. And when I started skydiving and spent a significant amount of time at a drop zone, some of the deepest philosophical conversations I've ever had. They're very relaxed, very kind of checklist-oriented style people. There's just a natural misconception about that. And then I start to develop that with other aspects of my life. And I think Freemasonry, with movies and, conspiracy theories, has a lot of that as well. And I think when I started reading about it and started asking about it, I was like, I think I'm really wrong about what I think Freemasonry is and what it's about, and why I was a little bit intimidated to ask to join. And when I started reading and asking Steve more philosophical questions, deeper, real questions, instead of just kind of the surface level stuff, I was like, this really seems to suit my lifestyle and my kind of desired outcome for where I'd like to take my life. That makes sense.
Yeah, fantastic. You just touched on something interesting related to the history of this in this building. What we learned today is this building gets used for a lot of movies. And Steve, there's a couple of them that were pretty interesting. One that, Gino, you sent it to your daughter already, was It 2.
Chapter 2, the staircase. I mean, they used the dining area and I guess the bar area here and whatnot, but the biggest piece that it was Darien. And they're coming down, and obviously lots of stuff happened in the movie at that particular scene or those scenes. And so I just took a picture. My daughter's a nut when it comes to it. She's only 16, by the way. And I sent her the staircase, and I said, hey, do you know what this is? And she immediately, oh my God, is that the staircase of It Chapter 2? Where are you? And then she knew I was out on a podcast show. She knew I was coming to the Grand Lodge building next to, so the Scottish Rite building. She knew where we were coming, but we had no idea what we were about to embark on and walk in and see, what we've seen also in different productions. And that's not the only one I was led to believe either. That was
there's several.
There was a lot of movies. I mean, I think it's a continuous revolving door for sets and things. He mentioned Crimson Peak was filmed here.
I got a funny feeling the first
Netflix
Three Knocks will be
series.
back here for many more lodge meetings, but also to dive further into some of the happenings that take place in this particular building. Again, it's a fantastic building. You're a lucky initiate to be a part of this history, this rich history.
Definitely.
We talked a bit about where you've come from and how you. Now, I think you mentioned a Guinness record holder too.
Yeah. Tell us
a bit about that.
Sure, yeah. 4-time Guinness World Record holder, although one of my records was broken, so that's why I say 4-time instead of like current 3. First one was the highest suspension straitjacket escape. So I hung upside down from a hot air balloon at 7,200 feet, and I was locked in a straitjacket and chains. That stunt I discovered the day before during the practice run at 50 feet that I was afraid of heights. So that one, it was a good thing I was wearing
Surprise.
some dark
Sorry, wait.
pants. Yeah.
Is this before or after the skydiving stuff?
So I learned to skydive to overcome the fear that I discovered.
Excellent.
So yeah, it took me a couple of years, but I figured, this is going to be an effective way, I think, to overcome the fear. The ground's not really real at 11,000 feet, and by the time it's rushing up, you're so busy flying your canopy safely, you're not thinking about your fear of heights, you're thinking about where you're going to land and how and all of that. And, the first few jumps, terrifying, but I really came to appreciate that. And it's funny, in the speech that I've just presented about the Stuntman's Guide to Staying Calm, there's another stunt that I do, Houdini's underwater milk can escape. So it's a metal drum that fills with water. You're shackled inside of it. The lid locks from the outside. So it's, tiny little space. It's pitch black, hard to communicate. Your body wants to float. There's nowhere for it to float. And you're typically underwater for about 4 to 5 minutes. So it sucks. And when I was getting ready for the first theatrical performance of this stunt, I was having these really deep panic attacks in the milk can. And in my studio, I wouldn't even have my assistant lock the lid down. It was just, so if ever I was having a problem, I could just stand up. And even that was bad. And so I called a hypnotist friend of mine who came over and did a relaxation exercise with me. And he's like, in the last year, what was the most kind of peaceful experience that you had? And I started thinking about it, and I was like, well, I was driving to the drop zone. I wasn't doing any stunts. I wasn't doing body double work. I wasn't filming any videos, but it's just a beautiful day with my skydiving buddies. We were just jumping into the puffy white clouds. And thinking about it after, he pointed out, he's like, you called me when you were learning to skydive to help with your panic attacks with that. Now you're using that to calm you down in the milk can. Like, it's come so full circle that's your visualization now. So it's really cool to be able to go in to a project now thinking like, I am absolutely terrified of this now, but in 5 years, I might be so comfortable and confident with the skills that I've developed that's going to keep me calm. So,
You'll probably find yourself going into the milk can for some peace and quiet.
yeah, totally. Maybe during the Corona outbreak. But yeah, no. So the 2 of my records involved skydiving. One of them was for the fastest moving card trick. So I went down to California with the intention of doing a handcuff jump out of the plane. And long story short, couldn't get permission. The lawyers wouldn't let me do it. And so they said we couldn't do an escape stunt, but they didn't say anything about doing magic tricks in the sky. So basically I did a card trick while free falling to the earth. And that was a very interesting experience. But yeah, had to do 5 takes of it, but got it done. The first time we didn't have a camera attached to the volunteer's helmet, basically to kind of wind up a little bit, jump out, fan the cards out, volunteer picks a card, puts it back on the deck, grabs the deck of cards from my hand, flies below me, and then lets go. My job is to reach out and grab one of the 52 cards and their selected card. So that was a card trick. The second time we did it, as I was flying to show the camera woman the card that I had caught, I let go of it, so I had to land and do it again.
Do it again.
Third time was great. Fourth time, we were jumping out of a different style plane, jumping out of the back instead of the side. So as a relatively new skydiver, that threw me off a little bit. And then the 5th time we were jumping on what's known as the sunset load. So the last plane load before the sun goes down. And unfortunately, it was a little too dark to clearly see the card. So the version that I show on my YouTube channel is of the 3rd take that we did. And it's good, not great. I'll probably redo it this year And
Yeah, well, that's fascinating. You
That
know what's
is
really
wild.
interesting about what you just described in that story is the number of takes that it took to get it right. And you talked a little bit about this at the beginning. People don't see that. People aren't
Sure.
aware of that.
Yeah.
You know, that extra effort, the small detail, the planning and the thinking and the execution against that. That is the real stuff.
And that's almost all of my speaking. And last year I produced a storytelling and magic show that was basically chronicling all of the major stunts that I've done. And I never showed a single video of any of the stunts. Almost, I think all of the stories were about the preparation or the aftermath. It wasn't specific to the trick. And that's, I think, where almost all of the takeaways and all of the meat of it is. And when I'm speaking at a high school, of course, they want to see the big stunt part of it, but that's not what I'm talking about. And no one ever comes up. They're like, why don't you talk more about the stunt itself? It's like, well, you can see that in the 3-minute video. It's pretty self-explanatory, but like the real solid takeaways are from all that prep. And the skydiving ones, the fourth, my most recent record was the highest blindfolded skydive. So I was jumping out blindfolded and handcuffed to my waist. That took 3 years of training for a trick that lasted less than 5 minutes.
Right.
We had to, I had to learn to skydive. I had to test it in the wind tunnels. I had to, push it back for personnel changes. That day of the stunt, I mean, that video gets out. It's been on some TV shows and stuff, but they don't show the fact that like that day earlier, I did just a blindfolded jump, which all of my skydiving friends are like, I've been jumping 20,000 times. I would never do it blindfolded. Before that, I did just a handcuff jump. And on that stunt, the handcuffs after I got out broke off my jumpsuit. Luckily, they landed in the parking lot of the drop zone. Didn't hit anybody because it would have killed them, but it dented the handcuffs so they don't, work properly. And I didn't think to bring a second pair of handcuffs. I just thought like I've got this.
We'd be fine.
Yeah. So, we're bending and prying them back into a semi-working condition, but like that doesn't get talked about in the videos. So
no summary of all those challenges.
Exactly. So it's interesting to kind of pull the audience into that world and into that mindset and kind of peek behind the curtain and expose them to a little bit of that. And that's where I think the real guts and the meat of the story is, because that's where the trials and tribulations are. And everybody loves the underdog story, or to find out like what actually goes into it, because it's relatable. We all have big projects that we're working on that people don't see the process. It's so glorified on television.
I was just going to say, pretending like I'm a high school student, understanding, the speaking side of what you're saying, and what you're really portraying to them is having a vision and a dream, setting out a plan, jumping into the fear, making all kinds of mistakes, but through, preservation and lots of practice, success comes.
Yes.
And so there's your journey, right?
For sure. Yeah, and success is often very different than the way we had envisioned it in the first place. And I think that's one of the new kind of focuses of a chunk of the speech now, is kind of giving permission for people to change what they're doing. I used to talk a lot about the importance of sharing your dreams with people. It makes you accountable. People will come up to you with connections and things that you never necessarily knew were out there. And I think that what I was lacking by exposing people to that theory is just the idea that inevitably your plan's going to change, and that's okay. When you start to share with people what you're planning on doing, and you start to learn a little bit more about it, you might think like, oh, people are going to think I'm a cop-out if I do it this way instead of what I had originally proposed. And I think it's just so important, especially with younger people, to really let them change their mind. Let them stop on a dream. If you invest so much of yourself and your life savings into something and it's not coming out, like if you gave it a fair shake and it's fine. So
I always am a believer of that. You know what I mean? Number one, I was always told you probably going to go through 3 major careers in your whole adult lifehood of work. All right.
It's more like 25.
I think I've gone through like 9 of them already. So just keep going. And that's one thing I encourage my kids, at least, is, you know what? You're allowed to have a dream today that could change tomorrow. Just reach for the stars.
Yeah.
And
totally.
don't let me and don't let mom or anybody else tell you can't, because those who are told they can't don't get to enjoy their life kind of
For
full,
sure.
right? So just go at it. And so it's awesome that you do this for them and have that side. It's not, again, you're just a trickster or a magician or anything. You actually have an amazing message. Yeah. And can portray it through that method, which I'm sure just has them sitting at the edge of their seats, you know?
Yeah. I mean, I think that the stunts really do kind of pull people in. Magic is at a nice point right now where it's everywhere. You've got Penn and Teller's Fool Us. You've got magicians, in the top 3 in America's Got Talent almost every year. There are a lot of David Blaine. His recent specials are really interesting and really captivating for people. I think it's at a nice spot, and it's also kind of the pendulum is swinging into this. It's an area of magic that I love to explore, of kind of combining storytelling with the magic. And it can be a little frustrating. I've been asked to do AGT a number of times. And one of my problems with that is that you start to do your act, and in the first 5 seconds, if they're not totally into it, there's a giant buzzing X right above your head.
Throws you off.
My high school presentation, my straitjacket escape's 25 minutes long, and at the end of the speech, kids are coming up and still asking questions about it. People think, oh, these high school kids with Facebook and their Snapchat and TikTok, they don't have the attention span. It's like, they absolutely do. You just have to do it in a compelling way.
You have to find a method to engage them.
Absolutely. And there's storytelling is the most ancient form of communication. Since people have been sitting around campfires, that's how knowledge has been passed on from generation to generation. I think that that will always be a really important part of what makes us human, our ability to communicate and share these experiences. And empathy allows us to feel what other people were when they were scared, because we all know what it was like to be scared at one point or another. And so that is kind of one beef that I have with some of those shows, and I've neglected to really go after that because of that element of it. And I think for me to do, my average audience is, let's say, 1,000 people. Well, to reach 1 million people total, that's a show every day for 3.5 years. You do America's Got Talent, and overnight you're reaching 9 million people. So
15 minutes of fame.
Totally. Right? And it's a great way to put that on your poster. You're going to sell 40% more tickets, but at what cost? I don't want them going into my shows thinking they're going to get these trick, and things taken out of context, where it's just not my style as much. So,
well, that's good for you. I mean, you're true to yourself in that approach, right? It's one thing to jump after the golden prize, but I certainly get a sense, even just from spending some little bit of time with you, that is just not how you operate.
Right. I think, I once read a quote from Ricky Gervais talking about how important it is to go after what you believe in, because if you change and concede on a lot of really fundamentally important points to you and the project flops, you've got nothing. Whereas if the project flops and you've really gone after and put forth what you believe in, at least you can say to yourself, well, I know that I might have been wrong about that, or that wasn't the right approach, but at least I tried it. And I'm all for failure. All of my greatest accomplishments have come out of huge amounts of failure. And so I'm not afraid of it. I embrace it. In fact, oftentimes if I start going down a path and I'm not failing enough, I'm not doing it right, and I know that. So I'll change it, like we were talking about before. I'll change the trajectory so that I start to fail a little bit more, so that I can, start to really challenge myself and push myself and take that in. So
very well said. It's changing gears a little bit here, Scott. We again back to the Barton Lodge tonight, which is going to become your mother lodge. How do you feel about this journey you're about to embark on?
I'm very excited. It's such an interesting place to be, because you don't know about Freemasonry until you join Freemasonry. So it's kind of going in blind a little bit. It's like hearing about a wonderful show that everyone's agreed not to spoil for you. And they're like, you've just got to trust me. You've just got to see this show.
Trust me.
It's
What have they told you so far, if anything?
About the actual initiation?
About the initiation, about Craft Lodge, about Masonry.
Those are I could talk at length, especially after the conversations I've had with Steve about that. In terms of the specifics to the initiation, one of my sponsors he called me yesterday or 2 days ago to be very, very clear. He said, Scott, I just want to make sure that you realize that if people were, razzing you about embarrassing things that they'll make you do, he's like, it's none of that. This is all about uplifting you and making sure that you know that you have a community of brothers who can be there for you, and everyone is just there for you tonight, and it's to help you out. And so it's not that I had any preconceived notions about, stripping you down naked and revealing all your deepest, darkest secrets on a table while everyone's in robes with tiki torches. Like,
Did you bring the tiki torches? Are they in the car?
So yeah, but like, I don't know. I'm, you hear about the handshake. I'm wondering if I'm going to learn like the first level of the handshake. I don't even know that. I just know that all of the Masons that I've met and tried to really communicate with about Freemasonry have been some of the most stand-up, most community-oriented people that I am surrounded by. And their desire to do a lot of anonymous charity work as well is really appealing to me. And just, the patience and the kindness that Steve has shown to me as an outsider really made me think, like, if this is what Masonry is about, this is what I want. I want to be able to learn about it. And, magic has been based very much on apprenticeship and having a mentor. And I've, been told, coming to lunch here at the Barton Lodge and talking with Steve about how that bond that you form with your mentor to, help you memorize stuff more effectively by learning about the history of it. So it's not just memorizing a paragraph, it's understanding what each of these words means. That is just so appealing to me. And just, again, all of these people that I really look up to, I think to myself, again, if this is the embodiment of what it means to be a Mason,
sign me up.
Sign me up. Yeah. Exactly. And that's why, I eventually asked Steve, like, how do I get signed up? And he's like, that's the right question.
There you go.
Yeah. It's been very interesting with Scott because, correct me if I'm wrong, he's very interested in Freemasonry and wants to know all about it. But when I give him specific things to look into, I give him a book called The Introduction to Freemasonry, or I said, hey, listen to these podcast episodes. He says, well, I don't know. I don't want to spoil anything for the initiation. I want to experience it. So I think that's really cool too. Is he's very interested in it, but he doesn't want to spoil anything. I said, no, this book isn't going to spoil anything. You're going to learn the basics of Freemasonry. Our podcast doesn't give away anything, but it's really cool to see that he's very into it and is excited and doesn't want to ruin anything. He doesn't want to spoil anything for himself. You could easily go online and look up secrets, but I know Scott has stayed away from that just so it's an exciting experience for him tonight. So
yeah, there's tons of information. We've talked about this on the show previously as well. You can get information on Freemasonry anywhere. The challenge with it is you don't get to experience it.
Yeah, it's not the same.
So the context is never there. And the only way you can get the context is by being in Freemasonry. And that looks different for everybody.
Yeah.
Gino's motivation, completely different than mine, completely different than Steve's. And that's okay.
Right.
That is just fine because we're all walking our own path together.
Yeah.
Well, and it's also tough because I, as an outsider, don't know what's real information and what's somebody, posting something to kind of lead people astray a little bit. I don't know what's real, what's not. So for me to look up, like, what is involved in the initiation ceremony, it's like somebody saying, well, what's Scott's show like? Yeah. It's like, well, it's going to be different for everybody. Some people are going to be talking about the straitjacket escape, while other people, they might have been less engaged with that part and more engaged when I'm doing a trick with someone else's money or something. You know what I mean? Like, everybody's got these different things. It's like, again, the best way is to just go in and experience it and try to not have any of it spoiled.
And that's the thing, it's a difficult thing to explain Masonry, which we've all talked about on the show before. But you ask Gino, you ask Bert, you ask me, you're going to get 3 different answers of what Masonry is. And that's the very unique thing about Masonry.
Yeah.
The advice I can give you tonight, just just be a sponge and enjoy the whole evening. I mean, like your sponsor said, these guys here tonight, these future brothers of yours, are all here for you, and you are in wonderful hands. We can't wait to go up into the lodge and see the Barton Lodge in action. You've got some pretty amazing fellas who are pretty high up in the craft that are coming just for you again tonight. They're having a special night because of the 225.
I don't know if he was told that yet.
Well, that's why I didn't.
There may be a
name
special
names,
guest coming for you,
but it's going to
Harry
be
Houdini?
a massive.
Very Masonic,
from the grave.
secretive kind of info there.
And again, you're a lucky guy to be a part of the history of this building, these lodges, and just Masonry in general. Again, we've only had half an hour, 40 minutes of time with you. I can tell that all the attributes that you have inside are exactly what Masons are and should be. And I wish you well on your journey of being a great man into a better man. So,
Well, hopefully we can, build this relationship forward and,
Absolutely.
come check out your lodges.
Yeah.
And
well, I think Steve had a wonderful idea when we finally found an initiate that would be kind of a mister and then a brother. I think we were going to probably have you
We'd
back
like to
as a
follow you,
part
yeah.
two.
I would love that.
And just kind
Yeah.
of see how, things looked from the other side and
Sure.
and what you thought that night. Again, I mean, we're getting some perspective of the before, but how after it felt and whatnot.
Yeah.
So we'll definitely, follow up. And you're obviously, again, once you become a brother, you're welcome anywhere to all lodges across the world, which is an awesome, cool thing to be a part of.
Totally.
And we'd be honored to have you come and visit out there as well. And in the historic Uxbridge.
Beautiful,
as
historic
well.
Uxbridge, Ontario.
Mayor of Uxbridge.
Well, and I'm excited to learn more about how, what it was for you guys to join up and, talk about your family connections and your, desires and what fascinates you. Because again, there's so many elements of it. There's the history, there's the brotherhood, there's the community element. There's, so many.
And everybody's got a different story. Every single person we bring on this podcast, we ask the first question: how'd you get involved in Masonry?
How'd you get involved, and what was your take?
Nobody's had the same answer. Everyone comes into it, on their own accord, and everyone has great stories.
I think the most interesting part from all those conversations, Steve, is the fact that everybody can't quite put their finger on it. There's just something. Yeah. And that would be maybe the most common part. And you're not supposed to know. You're supposed to figure it out.
Yeah.
That's the exciting part. So.
I'm so excited.
You're a really unique individual to sit down and chat with. Your business, maybe if our listeners wanted to reach out to you and talk to you about your the work that you do,
or even watch the amazing videos of all the escapes.
Videos, how would they go about getting in contact with you?
My website is scotthammell.com. Hammell can be tricky to spell, so if you type in scotthamburger.com, it will just send you right to my website. That's an easy one to remember. And I'm going to be launching my version of the relaxation podcast called A Stuntman's Guide to Staying Calm, which is essentially just relaxation exercises, guided meditation style stuff. So if anybody's feeling particularly stressed and they want to track that down, you're welcome to it. And
wonderful.
Yeah, that's
wonderful.
probably the best way.
We'd love to share it on ours as well, with your permission.
Of course.
Mark, I just started doing some meditation, so we'll be talking a little bit more too.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me, guys.
Well,
This
thanks
is
for being on the
very
show.
exciting.
Absolutely. Thanks for taking
Enjoy
the
your
time.
evening. Have a wonderful time, and we'll be watching.
Awesome.
Cheers.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of The First Three Knocks. Happy to meet, sorry to part, happy to meet again.